The rain was falling softly outside the tall glass building as morning light touched the city skyline. Inside the top-floor meeting room of the Harrington Group, everything was shining with wealth and confidence. Polished tables, golden lights, and the soft hum of voices preparing for one of the biggest meetings in the company's history. A deal worth $750 million was about to be discussed. Everyone knew it, everyone wanted to be part of it. At the center of the room sat Richard Harrington, the powerful CEO known for his calm smile and sharp mind. Around him were 10 senior executives dressed in the finest suits, each one eager to impress and secure their place in the company's success. Coffee cups rattled, papers shuffled, whispers filled the air as they waited for the doors to open, and then she walked in. Emily Harrington, Richard's only daughter, 25 years old, calm, kind, and smart but shy, stepped into the room with quiet confidence. She wore a simple blue dress, carried a small notebook, and smiled politely. She had just finished her degree in business and wanted to learn from her father. It was her first time attending such a major meeting. She took a seat near the window, her heart beating fast but her face showing steady composure. Some of the older executives exchanged quick glances. One of them, Mr. Clarkson, leaned toward another man and whispered with a grin, "Nepotism at its finest." Another chuckled softly. Pretending to adjust his tie, the laughter spread quietly like smoke. Polite on the surface but cruel underneath, Emily heard it. She felt it in her chest. But she said nothing. Her father began to speak, his voice calm and confident. "Today we present our final proposal to the global allied partners. This deal will define our company's future." As he spoke, slides changed on the big screen showing profits, growth charts, and marketing projections. The room looked proud, even arrogant. Everyone believed the deal was already theirs. When the presentation ended, Richard asked if anyone had questions or suggestions. A few executives nodded and began to compliment the work, calling it flawless, strong, unbeatable. Emily raised her hand gently. Her father smiled and said, "Go ahead, sweetheart, what do you think?" She stood up slowly, holding her notes close to her chest, her voice soft but clear. "I noticed a small problem in the data about the regional markets," she said. "The numbers for the Asian sector seem off. It could cause confusion for our partners. Maybe we can double-check the source before we finalize the presentation." Her tone was respectful, her concern genuine. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then a few quiet laughs followed. Mr. Clarkson leaned back and said with a smirk, "That's adorable." "The CEO's daughter doing homework," another added. "Maybe we should hire her as our math teacher." Soft laughter spread again. Polite on the surface, sharp underneath. Richard's face tightened slightly, but he tried to keep the room calm. "Thank you, Emily," he said kindly. "We'll take note of that. Now let's move on." Emily sat down, her face still calm but her heart sinking. She looked out the window at the rain and thought how people could laugh so easily without knowing the truth. She didn't want to embarrass her father. She didn't want to argue, so she stayed silent, writing small notes in her book as the meeting continued. The executives kept talking about profits, branding, and projections. They used big words, spoke with confidence, and praised each other. None of them noticed the small error she had pointed out was not just a simple number mistake. It was something deeper, something that could destroy the deal if left unchecked. The meeting ended with loud applause and smiles, everyone shaking hands and congratulating themselves. Richard walked over to Emily and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did well today," he said warmly. "But maybe next time be careful before questioning the team in front of everyone." She nodded gently. "I understand, Dad," she whispered, though her voice carried a quiet sadness. As everyone left the room, Mr. Clarkson walked by her and said with a smile that was not kind, "Don't worry, Miss Harrington. We'll teach you how the real world works." She smiled back politely, but inside she made a silent promise. One day she would show them exactly how the real world worked. When the doors closed, Emily stayed behind for a moment, alone in the silent room. She looked at the empty chairs, the shining table, the flickering city lights beyond the window, and whispered to herself, "They laughed at me, but they don't know what's coming." She picked up her notebook and began to check the numbers again, her eyes moving quickly, her fingers tracing lines of data, and there it was, a mistake so small it could be missed by anyone, but so dangerous it could cost the company millions. Outside, thunder rumbled softly, the sound echoing through the tall glass, as if warning what was about to come. She closed her notebook slowly and took a deep breath. She didn't know yet how deep the problem ran. She didn't know who was behind it. She only knew one thing for sure. This was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning. By morning, those who laughed would wish they hadn't. because the storm she had just discovered would change everything. The night air was quiet as Emily sat in her small office beside her father's grand corner suite. The city lights sparkled like fireflies beyond the tall windows, and the only sound was the soft tapping of her keyboard. Everyone else had gone home hours ago, but Emily stayed. Unable to let go of the thought that something was wrong with the presentation, her mind kept circling back to that small number on the slide, a single detail that did not feel right. She opened the files again, scrolling through the pages of numbers, projections, and reports. The data looked perfect at first glance, polished and confident just like the men who had laughed at her. But when she compared the regional numbers with the real reports, her eyes widened. The profits were exaggerated, and not by accident. Someone had changed the figures to make the deal look more successful than it really was. Her heart began to race. She checked the timestamps on the edits. The numbers had been modified late at night 2 weeks ago, long after business hours, by someone with access to the top-level data. She whispered to herself, "This can't be a mistake. Someone did this on purpose." The longer she looked, the clearer it became. The presentation promised a profit that didn't exist if this deal went through. The company would face losses in the hundreds of millions. It would destroy their reputation, her father's name, everything. She closed her eyes for a moment and tried to stay calm. She had to tell someone. She had to act now. She opened her email and began typing, her fingers shaking slightly as she wrote to the senior team. She explained what she found, attached the screenshots, and asked them to review the data before final submission. She signed it simply, Emily Harrington. But as she hit send, a small voice in her mind whispered that they would not listen. Minutes later, her phone buzzed with a reply from Mr. Clarkson. His message was short and sharp. "Thank you, Miss Harrington. We will handle this internally. Please focus on your studies." A few moments later, another email appeared from Ms. Vance. Polite but cold, it said, "Let the professionals deal with it, dear. We appreciate your concern." She sat there staring at the screen, her lips pressed together. The same people who laughed at her in the meeting were now brushing her off like a child. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the city lights again, thinking about how people could smile to your face and hide knives behind their backs. She felt the weight of silence around her, the ticking of the clock, the hum of the air conditioner. Everything seemed louder in that moment. And then she made a decision. If they would not listen, she would find the truth herself. She opened the company's internal system again and began to trace the path of the changed files. The access logs showed usernames, timestamps, and transfer records. Her fingers moved fast as she followed the trail line by line, each record leading her deeper into the digital maze. Her eyes narrowed as she noticed something strange. The same file had been opened from an external network, one not listed under company control. Someone outside the company had touched it. Her heart skipped. She checked again. The address belonged to a rival firm known as Dominion Global, a company that had competed with Harrington Group for years. She whispered softly, "How did they get access?" Her pulse quickened. The truth was forming slowly like a storm cloud. The numbers were changed to make the deal look perfect so that when it failed, Dominion Global could step in and take over the market. Emily felt a chill crawl up her spine. She realized this was not just an error, it was sabotage, and the people she had emailed might be part of it. She saved every file, every trace onto a flash drive and hid it in her bag. She didn't know who to trust anymore, not even the people sitting next to her father in the boardroom. The building felt larger and emptier now, the soft lights flickering against the polished floors. Her reflection looked back at her from the glass wall. Her eyes filled with fear but also fire. She whispered, "If they think I'm just the CEO's daughter, they're wrong." She packed her things and left the office quietly, her heels clicking softly in the hallway like echoes of determination. When she reached the parking lot, the rain had started again, soft at first, then heavy. Washing the city in silver streaks, she sat in her car gripping the steering wheel, thinking of what to do next. She wanted to call her father, but she couldn't risk it yet. If the wrong person heard, everything would be lost. So she decided to wait until morning to gather more proof. As she drove home through the quiet streets, her phone buzzed again. Another email, but this one was different. No name, no signature, only words that made her blood run cold. "Stop digging, it's not your business." She pulled the car to the side of the road, her heart pounding. Who sent this? How did they know she was investigating? She looked around the dark street, feeling watched. Her hands trembled as she turned off the phone and stared out into the rain. She knew now that the mistake she had found was just the beginning of something much bigger. "Something dangerous," she whispered into the night. "They think I'll stop, but I won't. Because I know what they're hiding." And as lightning flashed across the sky, the city lights flickered like warning signals. The storm was growing, and Emily Harrington was standing right in the middle of it, unaware that the next 24 hours would change her life forever. The morning sun rose over the city, but Emily hardly noticed it as she sat at her desk staring at her computer screen. Her eyes were tired from lack of sleep, and her mind felt heavy with fear and confusion. She had spent the entire night checking files and collecting evidence. Every click brought her closer to a truth she was not sure she wanted to find, and yet she couldn't stop. Something deep inside her kept pushing her forward, whispering that she had to protect her father and the company before it was too late. The office was quiet that morning. The usual noise of phones and footsteps had not yet begun. She liked those early moments when the world was still waking up. It gave her time to think. She opened the financial report again and compared it with the original document from the archives. The difference was clear. Someone had manipulated the data and sent it to Dominion Global. She checked the access logs once more and saw the names that made her heart skip a beat. Mr. Clarkson and Ms. Vance. She froze in her chair, staring at the screen. She wanted to believe it was a mistake. Maybe someone else used their accounts. Maybe there was another explanation. But deep down she knew the truth. The same people who had laughed at her were now selling out her father's company for their own gain. She felt anger rise inside her, mixed with disbelief and sorrow. She had trusted them, she had respected them, and they had betrayed not only the company but her father's legacy. Just then she heard footsteps outside the hallway. Voices laughing, she recognized them immediately. It was Clarkson and Vance. She leaned closer to the door, her heart beating fast, trying to hear what they were saying. The voices grew clearer as they stopped near the conference room next to her office. She could hear Clarkson's deep chuckle and Vance's sharp voice saying, "By tomorrow night the deal will be signed and we'll have our payout from Dominion." "Nobody suspects a thing," Clarkson replied. "Except maybe the princess she was snooping around last night." Vance laughed. "Let her play detective, no one takes her seriously anyway." Emily felt her stomach twist. She pressed her hand against her mouth to stop herself from gasping. Her mind raced. They knew she was investigating. She needed proof, real proof. She quietly picked up her phone and turned on the voice recorder, holding it near the small gap between the door and the wall. Their voices continued, calm and confident. Clarkson said, "Once the deal is signed, Harrington will take the blame when the numbers collapse. Dominion will buy the company for half the price," Vance replied softly. Poor Richard, too blind to see that his biggest mistake was bringing his daughter into the room. Her hands shook as she ended the recording and saved it. The proof she needed was finally in her hands, but it also meant she was in danger. She didn't know how far they would go to protect their secret. She quickly copied the file and the recording to her flash drive and hid it inside her bag. Then she took a deep breath, trying to calm the fear rising inside her chest. Moments later, she walked down the hallway, pretending to act normal, smiling politely at the employees who were just arriving. But inside her thoughts were racing. Should she tell her father now? Should she wait until she had even more evidence? What if they tried to destroy the files before she could prove it? She needed a plan, a way to expose them without alerting them first. She decided to go to the IT department, pretending to need technical help. She smiled at the young technician named Aaron and asked him to check the backup servers for unusual access logs. He looked at her curiously but agreed as he worked. She stood beside him watching the screen. Within minutes, the log appeared, showing multiple unauthorized entries late at night from Clarkson's and Vance's accounts. Her suspicion was now confirmed. She thanked him quietly and told him not to mention it to anyone, not even her father. He nodded, unsure but respectful. As she left the room, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It read, "We warned you to stop digging. This is your last chance." She felt a wave of cold fear wash over her. Someone was watching her, maybe from inside the building. She looked around quickly but saw only busy employees rushing to their desks. She put the phone away and hurried back to her office, locking the door behind her, her hands trembling as she sat down again. She whispered to herself, "I can't stop now, they'll destroy everything." She opened her laptop and began typing a report detailing everything she had discovered: the changed data, the rival company connection, the recorded conversation, and the warning messages. She planned to send it directly to her father later that evening, once she was sure it was safe. Hours passed like minutes as she worked in silence, her thoughts heavy with fear and determination. The walls around her seemed to close in, but she kept going. The more she uncovered, the more dangerous it became, yet she couldn't turn back. She was fighting not just for her father, but for the truth itself. Late in the afternoon, as the sun began to set and the office emptied, she heard soft footsteps outside her door again. A shadow paused by the glass window. She froze in her seat, her eyes wide. The handle turned slowly, then stopped. After a long moment, the shadow moved away. She exhaled shakily and whispered, "They know I have proof. I have to be ready." That night, as she packed her things and stepped into the elevator, she felt the weight of everything pressing on her. Betrayal, fear, courage, all mixed together. She looked at her reflection in the metal doors and whispered, "Tomorrow they will know the truth, no matter what it costs." As the elevator doors opened and the cold night air touched her face, she had no idea that tomorrow would not only expose the traitors, but also test her strength in ways she had never imagined. The next morning came heavy with gray skies and tension in the air. The rain had stopped, but the clouds still hung low, as if the world itself was waiting for something to break. Inside the headquarters of the Harrington Group, people rushed through the halls carrying files and whispers. Everyone knew this was the day of the big signing, the deal worth $750 million that would decide the future of the company. Excitement filled the air, but Emily felt only dread. She sat at her desk staring at her laptop, the recorded voices of Clarkson and Vance still playing softly in her headphones. Each word felt heavier than the last. She had listened to it a dozen times, memorizing every tone, every smirk hidden behind their laughter. Proof of their betrayal now burned on her flash drive, but she knew evidence was useless if no one believed her. Her father trusted those people completely, and if she accused them without warning, it could destroy everything before the truth even came out. Her phone buzzed with a message from her father. "Meet me in the main boardroom in 15 minutes. Bring the marketing revisions," she typed back quickly. "On my way," her heart thudding harder with each second. She looked at the small flash drive in her palm, its silver surface cold against her skin, and whispered to herself, "This is it. Either they fall today, or I do." As she walked down the long hallway toward the boardroom, she passed smiling employees who greeted her politely. None of them knew what storm was about to break inside those glass walls. She reached the heavy wooden doors and paused, taking a deep breath before stepping inside. The room was full. Executives in suits, assistants with tablets, even representatives from Dominion Global sitting with calm expressions. Clarkson and Vance sat near the front, their smiles sharp and fake as knives. Her father stood at the head of the table. Confident and composed, he greeted her warmly. "Emily, my dear, glad you could make it. Take a seat. We are about to begin." She nodded and sat quietly beside him, pretending to flip through her papers while her mind raced. Clarkson began the presentation, his voice smooth and practiced, speaking about future growth, global expansion, record profits. Everything sounded perfect, too perfect. Emily watched him closely, her fingers gripping her notebook tightly under the table. As he continued, she saw how Dominion's representatives nodded approvingly, how Ms. Vance smiled with polite charm, how her father listened with trust. None of them saw the trap forming around them. She wanted to shout but held her breath, waiting for the right moment. Then Clarkson turned to her father and said with a confident grin, "If there are no objections, sir, we can proceed to the signing." Richard nodded and said, "Everything seems excellent. Congratulations to the team. Let's make history today." Emily's heartbeat thundered in her chest. This was the moment. She stood up suddenly, her chair scraping softly against the floor, her voice trembling but strong. "Wait, we can't sign this deal." Every head in the room turned toward her. Silence filled the air. Clarkson frowned, pretending confusion. Miss Vance raised an eyebrow. Richard looked surprised. "Emily, what are you talking about?" "This is the opportunity of a lifetime." Emily held her ground, her voice shaking but growing stronger with every word. "This deal is not what it seems. There are fake numbers in the proposal, manipulated data. Dominion has been receiving our files through someone in this very room." Her father's face went pale. Clarkson laughed lightly, trying to brush it off. "Emily, you must be mistaken. These are serious accusations." She turned to him and said calmly, "I'm not mistaken. Because I have proof." She took out the flash drive and handed it to the technician controlling the projector. "Please play the audio file." He hesitated, looking at her father. Richard nodded uncertainly. "Go ahead." The room went silent as the recording began. Clarkson's voice filled the air. "Once the deal is signed, Harrington will take the blame. Dominion will buy the company for half the price." Then came Vance's voice. Poor Richard, too blind to see that his biggest mistake was bringing his daughter into the room. Gasps filled the room. The Dominion representatives looked shocked. Whispers erupted like a wave. Richard turned to Clarkson and Vance. His face red with anger and disbelief. Clarkson tried to stand, stammering excuses. "That's not real, it's edited." Emily stared at him coldly. "I recorded it myself. And I traced the files you sent to Dominion from your accounts. You betrayed us and you laughed about it." The room exploded in tension. Security was called. Clarkson and Vance tried to protest, but no one listened. Dominion's representatives stood up quietly and left. Their faces pale, Richard sank into his chair, his hands covering his face. The silence that followed was thick and painful. Emily walked over to her father and placed the flash drive in his hand. "I had to tell you. I couldn't let them destroy everything you built." He looked up at her. His eyes filled with a mix of shock, pride, and sorrow. "You saved us, Emily," he whispered. "You saved us from disaster." Around them, the executives murmured in disbelief, some apologizing for doubting her, others shaking their heads in shame. The same people who laughed at her days ago now looked at her with awe as the meeting ended and the traitors were escorted out. Richard placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "The world will know what you did today," he said softly. But Emily shook her head. "I don't care if they know, I just wanted the truth to come out." She turned toward the window where the clouds were finally breaking apart, sunlight spilling through like hope returning after a storm. But somewhere deep inside she knew the story wasn't over, because power and money leave shadows that don't fade easily. And though the traitors were gone, Dominion Global would not forgive the girl who exposed their game. The next storm was already forming beyond the horizon, waiting for its turn to strike. The news spread like wildfire across the city that morning. Before the sun had even fully risen, the headlines flashed across every business channel and newspaper. The betrayal inside the Harrington Group exposed by the CEO's daughter. Words that echoed in every office and every meeting. People whispered her name like it was part of a legend. Emily Harrington, the quiet girl who had stood in front of the most powerful men in the company and revealed their lies. But while the world praised her courage, inside the company the air was heavy with fear and chaos. Richard Harrington sat in his office staring out the window, his reflection pale against the glass. Behind him his daughter stood silently, her hands clasped in front of her, the silence between them thick but not empty, full of unspoken things. After a long pause he turned toward her and said softly, "I still cannot believe it, Clarkson and Vance. I trusted them with everything." Emily looked at him with gentle eyes and said, "Sometimes the people closest to us hide the darkest secrets." He nodded slowly, his voice trembling slightly. "You were brave to speak up. I am proud of you." Outside the office, chaos ruled. The board was holding emergency meetings. Lawyers were rushing in and out. Phones kept ringing nonstop. Employees whispered nervously in the halls, wondering what would happen next. Clarkson and Vance had been escorted out by security, their faces pale and angry. Reporters had already surrounded the building trying to get statements. The once proud company now stood in the center of a storm that threatened to tear everything apart. Emily walked quietly through the halls, watching people glance at her with awe and curiosity. Some smiled and nodded, others looked away, unsure how to act. She could hear pieces of conversations around her. "She saved the company, she exposed them. She's the reason we still have jobs." The words made her heart heavy. She never wanted fame, she only wanted truth. And now that she had it, she felt no joy, only exhaustion. In the afternoon, a press conference was called. Cameras flashed as Richard stood before the microphones. Emily beside him, he spoke in a calm, steady voice. "Today we discovered betrayal within our ranks. 2 senior executives were involved in secret dealings that endangered our future. Thanks to the courage and intelligence of my daughter, their actions were exposed before the deal could destroy us. I will personally ensure justice is done." The crowd cheered, the cameras clicked, but Emily could only think about what would come next, because she knew the story was not finished yet. As the conference ended, a man in a gray suit approached her quietly, his face unfamiliar, his tone polite but cold. "Miss Harrington, I am here on behalf of Dominion Global. My employers would like to request a private discussion." Her father immediately stepped forward. "There is nothing left to discuss, the deal is off." The man smiled faintly. "We understand, but my employers insist they have a message for your daughter." Emily frowned slightly, her father refused again. But the man only nodded. "Very well, I have been told to deliver this personally." He handed Emily a small white envelope and left without another word. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper with only one sentence written in neat black ink. "You may have won the battle, but the war is far from over." Emily stared at the words, feeling a chill crawl up her spine. She folded the paper and slipped it into her pocket. deciding not to show her father yet. She didn't want to worry him more than he already was. Later that evening, as the offices emptied and lights dimmed, she found herself walking past the empty boardroom, the same room where she had stood the day before and exposed the truth. It was quiet now, the chairs neatly arranged, the screens dark, the air heavy with memories. She walked to the center of the room and looked around, remembering the laughter, the disbelief, the gasps. It all felt so far away and yet so close. She whispered softly to herself. They thought I was a joke. Now they know who I am. Her phone buzzed. It was Aaron from the IT department, the young technician who had helped her before. His voice sounded nervous. Emily, you need to see this. Someone tried to erase all the digital logs from last week. Someone is still accessing the servers. She felt her stomach twist. How can that be? Clarkson and Vance are gone. He hesitated. I know, but the access came from an external connection. Maybe Dominion is still trying to cover their tracks. I'm sending you the report. She thanked him quickly and hung up. Her mind spinning, the danger was not over. The company was still under attack. She rushed to her father's office, but he was already gone for the night. His assistant said he went home exhausted. Emily decided not to wait. She locked herself in the small operations room and opened the system. Her eyes scanned the data logs. New entries were appearing even as she watched. Unknown users trying to delete files and encrypt backups. She typed fast, blocking connections, saving what she could. Sweat forming on her forehead. The quiet hum of the computers sounding louder with every passing second. Finally, the connection stopped, the system froze, then went still. She exhaled deeply, her heart pounding. She looked at the screen and whispered, Whoever you are, I'm not afraid of you, because I will always find the truth. She saved the remaining data on a new flash drive and slipped it into her bag, this time locking it safely in a drawer before leaving. When she stepped outside the building, the city lights glowed softly and the cool wind brushed against her face. She looked up at the sky, thinking about how much her life had changed in just a few days. From being laughed at to being feared. From being ignored to being watched. She knew this was not the end, but only another beginning. The war Dominion had promised was coming, but she was ready for it. Because courage once awakened cannot sleep again. The night after the storm inside the Harrington group was strangely quiet. The building stood tall under the city lights, calm on the outside but restless within. Secrets had been revealed. Traitors had fallen, yet something darker still lingered in the air. Emily sat by her window staring at the glowing skyline, her mind replaying every moment of the last few days. The laughter, the betrayal, the fear, and the truth. She had won a battle, but her heart told her it wasn't over, not yet. Her phone vibrated on the table beside her. A message appeared from an unknown number. We need to talk tomorrow, noon, Hotel Grand Royal, come alone. She stared at the message for a long moment, knowing exactly who it was, Dominion Global, the company that had tried to destroy her father's empire. Part of her wanted to ignore it, but another part whispered that maybe this was her chance to end it once and for all. She took a deep breath and whispered to herself, They started this. I'll finish it. The next day came bright and cold. She dressed simply, a white blouse and black slacks, no makeup, no jewelry, only the flash drive around her neck on a small silver chain, the same flash drive that held every piece of evidence. She left early without telling her father, taking a quiet car to the hotel. The lobby was grand and silent, chandeliers hanging like frozen raindrops. She walked through with steady steps, her eyes calm but alert. A tall man in a navy suit approached her, his face stern but polite. Miss Harrington, this way, please. She followed him through a corridor to a private meeting room. Inside sat a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a calm smile. Emily recognized her immediately. It was Catherine Doyle, the CEO of Dominion Global, the very person who had watched her company's downfall from the shadows. Catherine gestured for her to sit, her voice soft and smooth. You have caused quite a mess, young lady. Emily sat without fear, meeting her gaze. I only told the truth. Catherine smiled faintly. Truth is dangerous in business, my dear, especially when spoken by someone who still believes in honesty. Emily's hands rested calmly on the table. Then why call me here? Catherine leaned forward slightly. Because you ruined a plan worth $750 million, and yet I admire you. Very few have the courage to stand against people like me. Emily watched her carefully, trying to read her expression. What do you want? She asked quietly. Catherine tilted her head. I want to make peace. Your father's company is in trouble now. Your board is divided. Investors are afraid, but I can fix it. All I ask is that you join me. Work with us. Use your intelligence for something greater. She smiled sweetly. Together we can rebuild everything. For a moment, Emily said nothing. The offer hung in the air like a whisper of temptation. But then she shook her head slowly, her voice steady and clear. You don't want peace, you want control. You tried to destroy my father's company. You corrupted people inside our walls, and now you want me to help you finish what you started? Catherine's smile faded, her eyes turned cold. You're very young. You don't understand how the world works. Business is not about loyalty or love. It's about power. Emily leaned forward, her voice calm but fierce. Then I'll build a world where power doesn't mean betrayal. Catherine laughed softly, a quiet laugh that carried both pity and warning. Then you've already chosen your war. She stood and turned toward the window, her voice distant now. You should know. Dominion has enough influence to crush your company in weeks. Walk away while you still can. Emily stood too, her eyes bright with defiance. You can try, but you'll lose again because you underestimate people like me. Catherine turned to face her, smiling faintly once more. We'll see, she said softly, and walked out of the room, leaving Emily standing in silence. The tension heavy and electric, Emily exhaled slowly, her hands shaking just a little, but her heart felt stronger than ever. She left the hotel and stepped out into the sunlight, the cold air filling her lungs like a promise. That evening she returned to the office. Her father was there waiting, his face lined with worry. Emily, where were you? I was looking for you all day. She handed him the flash drive and said quietly, I went to meet Dominion. They wanted peace, but I know it's just another trap. We have to act fast. Her father nodded, understanding immediately. What are you thinking? She smiled faintly. We release everything. Every file, every recording, every number. We show the world the truth before they twist it again. Within hours, a full report was prepared. Evidence of corruption, sabotage, and fraud, linked directly to Dominion Global. It was sent to the media, to the authorities, to every investor and partner. The story exploded across the world overnight. Dominion stock crashed, investigations opened, and within days Catherine Doyle resigned publicly, denying involvement but unable to escape the damage. The following week, the Harrington Group was offered a new partnership from an international firm impressed by Emily's courage and transparency. The deal was worth even more than the original one, nearly $800 million. Her father stood beside her as they signed it together, his voice soft with pride. You've not only saved this company, you've given it a new life. As the cameras flashed and applause filled the room, Emily smiled quietly, remembering the day they laughed at her, the day they ignored her voice, and the night they tried to silence her. Now they looked at her with respect and admiration. The same people who once mocked her now called her the future of the company. Later that night, she stood alone on the balcony overlooking the city lights. The wind gentle against her face, she whispered softly. They laughed at me once, but that laughter cost them $750 million, and maybe now they understand that kindness is not weakness. It's strength in disguise, she smiled faintly, knowing her story was only beginning, because the world would always test her again, but she was ready for whatever came next.